Hey there, George here, going to make a memorial marble. Alright, so we're going to make a memorial marble, which will be basically a ribbon swirl. There's going to be two hemispheres that are clear and a dividing plane in between the two hemispheres that's going to be transparent color, and then a pickup of cremation ashes. And so the color that I'll be using for this one is half cobalt, half red, and then we will be making our clear hemispheres of these large diameter rods. I'll use a long rod like this until they get about a little bit shorter than this, and then I will have to attach a handle to them so that I can use them without, well, still being able to handle them because of the intense heat of the flames here. And the perspective that you have might be a little bit off since it's flattened out for video, but there's like a distance between me and the torch, a distance between the torch and the camera, and then there's a small magnifying glass here in case we want to show you anything that's close up. And so here we can show you the close-up of the cremation remains, which is, here is a small pile of them, actually just a tiny half teaspoon, and then it's screened out for the pickup into a paper thin layer. I'm just going to set that back there. All right, so I'm going to start melting this rod. I'm going to start adding clear to this rod. I'm going to add the plane of color, do my pickup of the cremation remains, add more clear, and then I'm going to start shaping the marble. All right, let's go. Just adjusting my torch angle a little bit and the size of the flame, and flash this to bring it up to temperature. That temperature being very, very hot. But it's going to go through some strain points along the way, which may make the glass pop, and it can make it explode if you try to heat it up right away. And you start seeing it get orange like that, and you know it can go a little bit quicker, but sometimes they'll still pop and explode. Scares you every time. So I'm wearing special glasses that protect my eyes from the sodium flare and UV rays coming off of the superheated glass. They also let me see things without a giant, bushy, yellow sodium flare. And you're getting the benefit of that too, because taped, well, not taped, but yeah, taped to the over the lens of my camera is one of these eyepieces, so that you are seeing what I'm seeing. So you can see the end is starting to get melted. I'm going to continue to melt it until it forms a ball. As the end melts and starts to droop, I'll tilt it back so it starts drooping in along itself and making a larger and larger gather. I'm going to keep it rotating so that it doesn't drip off. So much of torch working, which is small-scale glass working, is a combination of heat, using gravity, and working against gravity by rotating your work or your gathers. So I'm constantly rotating. As you can see here, it's off frame. You see, there's some motion over here. It's my hand keeping this thing moving. And when I start doing things on this side, you'll see also keeping things moving with both hands. Once this gather starts getting big, I'm going to start heating up a second rod to get my next gather gold. So I'm rotating this one and I'm flashing this one. Now I'm just rotating them both. This gather's getting big. This one's going to start forming a gather as soon as I start seeing orange up here at the tip. When the gather on this one gets big enough, I'm going to flatten it out on a marble plate, which is just to my left this way. And form that droplet into a disc. Just going to let it cool a little bit so it solidifies. And then as this one starts forming a gather, I'm going to put this one farther back in the flame just to keep it up at temperature. I'm going to put one more gather on this. And then I'm going to start building my plane of intersecting color. And then I'm going to shape that colored disc to the size I want, and then I'm going to do my pickup. The pickup being the ashes for the cremation remains. And the cremation remains are prepared in advance. I sift out big particles so that there's only small ones left. Out of those small ones, I will then use a mortar and pestle to grind those down into even finer powder. Then I will mix them with a small amount of white enamel powder, and that allows them to bond to the glass, sort of encapsulating them. Left on their own, the ashes don't want to get attached to the glass. And if you leave big pieces in there, they basically flash into vapor and make bubbles, making the glass crack. So once I've picked up the cremation remains, the finely ground cremation remains mixed with enamel, I'm also going to superheat them to burn off anything else that might want to turn into gas. Okay, I'm going to put my next gather on my disc. There it is. Flatten it. Now it's two discs starting to form a cylinder. I'm going to decorate this disc with transparent colors of blue and red. Half the disc will be blue, the other half will be red. I'm going to use a swipe gather. Swipe gather is nice because I can deposit as much or as little glass as I want onto the surface depending on the temperature on which I deposit it. If this glass is very hot, I can leave very little glass behind. If it's cold, I'll leave a lot behind, and it might actually just end up welding to my surface. So I'm going to use a fairly hot gather and do a swipe where I've left some of that cobalt blue on the surface of the disc. I'm going to do one more to complete this part of the disc, like so. And now I'm going to switch to red to do the other side. So that's cobalt blue, the other side will be red. Pretty hot swipe gather. Let's see. And the red glass I'm using will mostly disappear into transparent until it strikes after the marble is all the way complete. Alright, use a swipe gather and cover the whole surface of that disc. Now I'm going to heat them and flatten them so I can make a nice even pickup of the cremation ashes. I'm going to do a few extra manipulations to shape my disc prior to pickup so that I can really control the area of what gets picked up into the marble. And the pains I take to do that is to make sure I get a complete encasement once I pick them up. Up, flatten the hair, put back in the flame right away, getting closer to my goals, but not so much that I'm squishing it in ways that I don't want it to go. So sometimes you can only get part way towards your goal of changing the shape. Sometimes you have to try to get as much done as you can in the 1 or 2 seconds that you have to manipulate the glass before it solidifies again. So I'm almost there. One more time. And now I've got my color arranged. Got it shaped the way I want the pickup to be, with a chamfered beveled edge right there for this disc. I constricted that disc where I'm going to get the pickup. Now I'm going to heat it up so it really grabs a lot of the cremation ashes. And then I'm going to quickly go and pick them up. Now I'm going to heat them strongly to vaporize any things that might want to gas out from there. And the enamel powder that I've mixed in with the cremation remains is going to pull that into the surface of that colored glass nicely. Now I'm going to start heating up my next large rod, and that one is too long. This one. I'm right up against the wall of my fume hood here, so I always have long rods in this hand and short rods in this hand, unless I'm at the other station of my fume hood, in which case I would do it in reverse. Although I'm usually on this torch making marbles, that's the way that I do things here. Isn't that weird? I haven't vocalized that before, but that's the way that it works out. This station is closer to the draw of the hood, which I like, so I'm getting the freshest air on this side. Alright, so I'm keeping this warm in the back flame because I don't want the temperature to drop really below 1500 degrees, maybe 1200. And then this rod, I'm going to get some gathers on. The first gather I want to be big and wet and cover over those cremation remains completely. And I'm going to put that gather on and quickly press it in on the marble plate that's right under here. And you can see I'm rotating both of these. Sometimes I'll switch directions, other times we'll just be on autopilot, keeping things moving. That gather's starting to get big. Get a little bit bigger, another 30 seconds, and then I'm going to go case those cremation remains. So I'm going to start amping up the temperature of the surface of the cremation remains too. So hopefully I get a nice gas-free encasement. can see this. Gather, separate off, press. There we go. A nice gather, covering over those cremation remains. And now I'm just going to add more clear on this side, another couple gathers to even out the two sides of my hemisphere. So this is the exciting part. You get to just basically heat stuff. I'll get 2 gathers out of like the next couple of minutes. And my filter is falling off again. It is hot in here, by the way. It's like 90 some degrees. Hotter closer to the torch. And I'm going to have to figure out another way, because the camera lens is on a different portion of the foam that I'm using on this foam from my old one. The tape I'm using that used to hold my lens filter on is not doing the job this time. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to make a separate stand for my filter that I can position in front of the camera. I don't like that though, because then that's another thing that could get jostled loose if there's ever any glass that's popping off. I need to get up and sit down again. I don't know, it's nice to eliminate variables rather than add variables. There's that next gather I just added. I'm going to squish it into a disc, and that's just evening up my gather. You know, when you put it on, is it centered? We don't know, but if it's close and everything's hot and you push it down, you can adjust as you push down and get it nice and centered. Not super important for this design, but it's just one of those things that you internalize and you add to your designs as you go. You know, as you learn, it's keeping your glass centered and even and symmetrical. Makes it easier to work. You know, this cylinder sort of looks like a mess, but it actually is pretty straight and nice. And when I melt it, it should come together fairly well. So many different marble designs do not look like the marble they will ultimately be during their creation and setup. They look like a bunch of dots or a cylinder with crap on it, and the manipulation of that crap or the cylinder becomes the design. Pretty fascinating. Endlessly fascinating, as a matter of fact, for me. And so you can't see the gather because this is now the sodium flare that I was telling you guys about that obscures what I'm doing in the torch. It's now evident to you because the filter fell off the lens. Maybe a happy accident, but also super annoying because you want to see what's going on in there. Alright, so let's get that last gather on there. Melt it off. Flame. And this last one I'm just going to push into a marble mold. So now I'm going to melt like everything from here over and try to get this whole this half of the marble that's unattached into a hemisphere shape. Once I have that in hemisphere shape, I'm going to attach a metal punty to the end and then separate this rod from my work and turn it all into a sphere. Turn up the temperature, flame size and intensity a little bit. Now that I have a pretty large piece of glass there that I essentially want to melt, I don't need this one. I keep my my steel punties or handles in a jar of water. That way, every time I put them away, hopefully very hot. When I put them in the water, any glass that's attached to them turns into dust and shatters off. And that way each time I pull it out, I've got a nice clean punty. And this is starting to pull together nicely. I'm going to persuade it in my marble molds a little bit. A little more spherical. I'm going to give it one more time. One more time through the flame, and then through the marble mold. And we'll get it on a steel rod. There's a lot of ways to keep your glass attached while not touching it. Having it on this big rod is nice because you can kind of crank on it, but spinning this larger rod is a little more fatiguing. I can see the cremation remains in there. Color. Now let's heat this steel punty up. The handle to which I will attach this. And heat up the glass a little bit too, so it's a little bit soft, so that I can bore in with this steel punty. And now I'm going to start melting off the glass. Large diameter clear. So that one's starting to get mushy. And another 10 seconds, probably come off. Now we'll heat this side until that rod end, remains of the rod end, starts pulling into the marble. The place where the disc and the rod met is kind of an indent, as you can see. And if I just heat that all gently, it should pull without trapping air, pull together without trapping air. If I was just to force it into the mold and make it the hemisphere shape, I would trap a ring-shaped bubble around where the rod shaft used to be, which I would then have to dig out later. So here, I'm just letting it pull together on its own. It takes longer, but overall it improves the clarity of the marble without bubbles or fluff or lines where you've done manipulation in the clear glass. It's pulling together now. And now it's hot and all the seams are gone, and I can put it through my marble molds. I'll go through a larger diameter hemisphere and just gently persuade it, rotating it through that hemisphere. And I'm going to a smaller one to make it more spherical, just using the rim of the mold, rotating it and changing the axis of rotation. And now you can see it's clear, color, formation remains clear. Now I'm going to take that disc, half blue, half red, use that line that separates two colors as the new axis of rotation. So I'm going to heat up this new handle, figure out where that axis is, and attach my punty there. And then, now that I'm attached, I'm going to melt off the existing putty. Look at it, red hot. And then pull it out. And then you can see there's some stuff in there. Clean that off. More. There we go. And I think we got it. Let's heat it up and get this thing realigned on its axis. There we go. Nice again. Now we'll find the other end of that axis on that end. Attach my handle back to it there. And now we're going to start adding some twist into it. Turn that plane of color into a ribbon core swirl, where will be color as a backdrop for the cremation remains. And now I'm just going to gently heat the whole marble. I want heat to go all the way through to the middle, and for the attachment end points to be a little cooler so that they don't just twist endlessly without imparting any twist into the middle. And add an itch. Now I'm rotating it and then catching one of the rods a little bit here and there as I go, and starting to put some of that twist into the marble. And in the next minute or two, you'll start to see that take off. And I want to put that twist in without deforming my spherical shape too much. I was doing a better job on my last one, deforming the sphere. This one's gone a little bit sideways, which won't be a problem on this design. It should come back. Just going to be a little extra careful. And then putting heat in, I'm moving the heat around, but generally keeping it in the center. Adding more heat where I think it's spinning too slow, and letting it cool off in areas where I think it might be spinning too fast. More twists getting put in the marble. Not too much on the ends, it's going mostly in the middle, where it has to travel the farthest distance. Usually I try to keep it in a tighter sphere. This one has come a little bit off, but we'll get it back in the right shape. As we finish off the twisting here, I'm going to heat this punty side and pull it out of the marble. I'm going to heat this free end and get it nice and spherical. First thing I'm going to do is put it through a larger hemisphere graphite mold to sort of persuade it towards sphericalness. Then I'll go to a smaller diameter hemisphere and rotate it, just using some light pressure on only the rim of the mold, but rotating it and changing the axis of rotation. And that will basically be a a ring traveling on the surface of the sphere. As I rotate it, it will want to fill that ring with that piece of sphere, that plane that intersects the sphere. And the rotation is going to bring the whole shape into a more perfect sphere. So let's go to larger hemisphere. I'll just give it some light touch. And I'll go into a slightly smaller one. And we've got our spherical shape. The surface is rippled from the graphite chilling the surface of the marble, which is nice because then that solidifies the surface, whereas the under part of the sphere can continue to move and perfect the overall shape of the sphere. But now I have to go back and remove all those little chill marks, little ripples left from the heat getting pulled out of the surface by the graphite. Sometimes you can have that happen pretty fast because there's all that heat left. The temperature is higher in the center of the sphere from when we were doing the twisting. And now I'm just going to quickly run it through the mold again to get it to approach even closer to a perfect sphere without causing too many ripples in the surface. But there's still ripples there, so I'm going to go back and do this process again, really heating the surface of the marble, letting surface tension pull all those ripples out, make the surface very smooth. Now that I have the shape defined on this free end, we're going to define the surface. Ripples are coming out now. The surface is very hot. I don't want to deform it at all, so I'm just going to let it calm down and lower in temperature. I'm going to use a cherry wood mold. Just do the last pass on this portion, hopefully. So rotate it, pass rotation, using each of the cherry wood rim molds just for a few seconds. So now it's spherical and ripple minimized. Now I'm going to heat up a glass rod for my last handle. Any schmutz on the end. Oxidized glass from where I fractured off the last marble. To a pencil point. And I want the marble to be hot, but not melted hot. And I want the tip to be just deformable so that I get a nice union between the two without joining them. Now I'm going to heat this pointy end where it attaches to the marble to red hot so it pulls out of the surface of the marble. At that same time, I'm heating the marble on the end. It's going to release that pointy, bringing a little bit of glass out with it, so I have a nice clean end, a nice spiral. And continue to heat it, and then I'm going to use my marble molds again on this free end of the marble. Just the last 40% of the sphere needs improvement towards a spherical shape. So, go in a larger mold, a smaller one. And we've got a nice spherical shape. I'm just going to polish out those ripply chill marks. can see the red starting to strike on this marble on the inside as the temperature has fallen. On the inside. And we're using the reflections from the light bulbs above us to see if there's any big deviations in the surface that would cause a wave in the reflection of the light. And they're really starting to come down to a nice smooth surface, glassy smooth. And there we go. Now I'm just going to let this temperature on this side that I was flame polishing calm down, and then when it gets to the right temperature for going in the cherry wood, I'll do that. That will chill the surface without changing the shape. Now I'm just going to chill this last mark and tap this off in a fire brick or a fire blanket or whatever you happen to be using. Then I'm going to bring my torch back and flame polish that last little mark off. So I'm going to use a fire brick today. I was using a fire plate from my kiln, but it seems to be coming apart. All the binder agent has been burned out, and it's really getting, I don't want it around anymore. So switching to a brick for today and polishing off the last little connection points. And while that's calming down and coming down in temperature, I'm going to heat up my little tweezers that I made for picking up marbles, and I get them orange, and then let them go down to about 1,000 degrees, which is just where they turn black. Pick up my marble. There it is. And I'm going to transfer it to the annealing oven. And those marbles are just over 1 inch, so they'll anneal for 2 or 3 hours, and then I'll gradually bring the temperature down over another 3 or 4 hours, and then let the last of the heat go away overnight, and then in the morning we'll take those out. I'm going to be doing a few more of those to complete the amount of marbles wanted for this order. And then we'll look at them all and decide. I made some extras because I think the ones at the beginning I probably won't be as happy with since I'm coming off of a little bit of a marble hiatus. It always takes a little bit to get your touch back. And I had a lot of new equipment this time. New phone, new torch. This is a let's turn that off. This is a Nortel mid-range. I had another one that I was working with for like 20 years, and it had developed a little bit of a gas leak, and I was lapping it and trying to clean it and get it to go back together, and I just could not find that small leak. It was annoying me. So I went ahead and ordered another one of the same model. There was only one place in the country that still had one. I probably should get a more modern style torch. Maybe this fall. We'll see. Sometimes the things that you are used to are the best. This one has a few things that I would love to fix. I just melted my Band-Aid. But I guess that's it. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.